I know some of you have already ordered right now. You're slamming the numbers on your phone already. You're trying to order as many bags as you can because this is such a special coffee from an international roaster. Cabra is in Denmark. They do a lot of Nordic roasts, and they do Nordic roasts really, really well. This is a super floral light roast coffee. It tastes like chamomile tea. There's honey sweetness to it, and it's just, there's so much to be said about it. And I'm actually going to have Hailie tell you a bit about it because when she tried it, she, quote unquote, said, damn. I said, damn. Did I just throw rose petals, rose hips, chamomile, and elderflowers into mellow hibiscus tea with floral honey mixed in, light acidity, light sweetness, all the nuanced complexity to keep me coming back and drinking this coffee all day. Oh, and for obvious reasons, Hailie is going to be brewing at home. You're probably going to be brewing at home too. So I'm going to have Hailie show you how to brew this on pour over. I'm going to be showing you how to brew it on French press. And then we'll have Hailie go back and show you how to brew it on Aeropress. But if you are daring enough to pull this as an espresso, I will be telling you about some recipes and suggestions that you can do towards the end of the video. I'm just so happy that we're able to drop a roaster like Cabra, and we hope you enjoy the following brew recipes.
What's going on, guys? Fellow fans, fellow coffee lovers, people of the fellows. Welcome back to another brew guide from Fellow Drops to You. I'm bringing you to my kitchen today because sometimes in these unprecedented times, you need to be separate from your people, which is unfortunate, but fortunately I have a whole coffee bar set up. I'm going to show you how to brew Cabra's Ethiopia Gedeb, washed Ethiopia Gedeb on Stag X, what we're doing for Stag X, and also on Aeropress as well. So we're going to get two done. Boom, boom, knock them out, just in case you were wondering about both of these. And I think you're gonna find these really interesting because Cabra's washed Ethiopia Gedeb is what we call a Nordic style roast. It is very, very exceptionally light, but still super well developed. And why that is because Nordic style roasts are typically characterized by a longer phase after first crack, so like a longer caramelization phase, or what they call the Maillard phase. And usually when coffee spends a long time in this phase, it tends to get darker and darker and darker roasted. But Nordic style coffees are roasted at a lower finishing temp, so it's a little bit of a lower temperature, but a stretched caramelization phase. So just because it's light does not mean it's underdeveloped. This coffee and Nordic style roasts are phenomenally and fantastically and thoroughly developed. And that's what we're experiencing with this coffee as well. It's super chamomile tea, super rose hips, just like a ton of floral botanicals going on in there. Some floral honey, and just it keeps expressing different things as it cools down. And today, I am actually gonna brew with good old Stag stovetop. Like to mix it up a little bit, so I hit just out of the temperature range. It's closer to boiling right now, so I'm gonna let it cool down to 205. I'm using Stag X today. And I am going to use the freshly boiled water to pre-wet the filter and pre-warm the dripper and vessel. And also to cool down the water a little bit because I want it to be right at that 205 mark for this brew. So we're brewing at 205 degrees. We are going to actually use a 14:1 ratio, which is bonkers for us, but it's definitely, for these Nordic style roasts and these lighter roasts, it definitely does it justice. And it's also suggested by Cabra. So once you're pre-wet and pre-warmed, I'm going to put that aside, measure out some coffee. So like I said, we are using a 14:1 ratio. So we're gonna do 25 grams of coffee in to 350 grams of water out. Again, super, super light roast, but really well developed. So you really wanna bump up that ratio. Bean measuring. All right, we're gonna measure this stuff out. I hope it'll go over, I hope it'll go over, I hope it'll go, can she do it? Now I'm grinding at 1 notch above 2 on a calibrated Ode with my V1.1 burrs. So I don't have SSP burrs at home right now. So these are V1, but with SSPs, you can afford to go a little bit over 3, but not over 4 with Ode with SSP. I calibrate to 1 click off chirp. And basically this is gonna give you a medium fine grind setting. Gotta get all that pre-warm going. We love to pre-warm We love when a kettle is just at temp when the coffee is ground. And we're gonna get it started. Now, another thing to note is not pouring your coffee grounds into your pre-wet filter too soon before you're ready to start the brew, because as soon as water hits coffee, gases are activated inside of it that basically start the brew process, right? So we call it pre-infusion. If you let it sit too long, it starts to pre-infuse. All right, we're gonna tear our scale out and we are going to pour, since this is 25, it's gonna go right up to a nice even 50, just about. Again, if you go a little over 50, like 51, 52, it's not the hugest deal in the world. I hit 53.9. You just don't want to go under. You want to make sure that you're soaking all of the grounds and you're soaking them just enough, but not too much. You don't want to overpower it. And this bloom is looking beautiful and expressive right now. I'm super excited. I'm also really excited about this coffee because it's really, really delicious 4+ weeks off roast. Actually, its prime time is like right around the 4-week mark and a little bit after. It just keeps expressing. So I let it bloom for 40 seconds. Again, light roast, you want to just pull as much as you can out of it and pull all of those nice developed notes out of it. And you really don't have to worry too much about over extracting. I mean, of course you can, but you definitely can push the bounds a little bit further with this coffee than you could others, just by how it was roasted. Really also want to take a minute to appreciate Stag Stovetop, our original, our OG, if you will, our #1 claim to kettles, because it really just has such a nice weight to it and it's super balanced. I mean, our electric, all of our kettles are, right? But it just specifically, it has such great balance. It's so dashing on my stove and still has the flow restrictor valve in the bottom of the gooseneck to help me not pour at different velocities how I'm holding it, right? All right, last pour. So it's really just a phenomenal piece of technology and it looks great on your stove too. Which is why I have a stovetop and a Stag EKG. So I poured, again, was the 50 grams about was the bloom. We're gonna let him pass. Busy streets. So I poured right up to 50-ish grams, of the bloom. 150, 250, 350, 349.6 grams, but you want to basically be at 350 to finish. And that is going to give you La Cabra. Really though, like seriously, let this cool down and this coffee will tell you stories. It's insane. It's great. It's wonderful. We're gonna let this cool down and we're gonna try it. Monty latte, give it a little pre-warm with my Stag stovetop before putting my Stag on the stovetop. Also, one thing to note, do not put your Stag stovetop with no water in it on the stovetop. Cheers, you guys. That is delicious. I stand by my quote that Brian read. It just feels like I threw rose hips, chamomile, everything that you would imagine in like a delicious, relaxing, like nighttime botanical herbal tea into a cup. It also has this sweet floral honey undertone to it, and that comes out as it cools down more too. And that's what I'm pulling out of it with filter.
All right, so let me show you all how to brew this on French press. So I'm gonna be using Clara French press for this, and I'm using 50 grams here. I'm grinding around setting 3 on an Ode with stock burrs, stock 1.1 burrs. And the thing with this coffee is because it's a lighter roast coffee, one of these more Nordic style roasts, I would recommend you push this a little bit finer. I think it worked really well for these lighter roast coffees, especially in something like a French press. Now, I'm using 50 grams of coffee to 700 grams of water. I'm using 205-degree water here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour in my 50 grams of coffee. I'm then going to agitate at 30 seconds. And then at 2 minutes, I'm going to plunge it halfway. And then at 4 minutes, I'm going to plunge it fully through. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I turn on my scale. I'm going to add in my 50 grams right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pour all the way up to 700. All right, and I'm gonna leave the lid on, and at 30 seconds, I'm gonna go in and give it a little bit of agitation. And then at 2 minutes, I'm gonna plunge it halfway, and then at 4, the full way. Okay, so giving this a bit of agitation now at 30 seconds. All right, then I'm gonna put the lid back on. Then at 2 minutes, I'm just gonna plunge it halfway. All right, so now it's 2 minutes. I'm gonna plunge this about halfway. All right, and at 4 minutes, I'm then gonna plunge this fully through, and then you're good to go. Gonna grab myself a cup. Now it's almost 4 minutes, and I'm going to plunge very soon. All right, now it's 4 minutes. Gonna plunge this fully through, and then you can pour yourself a cup. All right, so what's really cool with this coffee in a French press is you're definitely gonna get those floral notes, but it's not gonna be as clear as the pour over. Definitely with some of these lighter roast coffees in the pour over, you might not actually want so much acidity, especially with Nordic roast styles of coffee. There's definitely some floral honey in here, and it does finish sweet, but I really like this because the acidity is much more rounded due to the French press. And also you get that larger body in this immersion brew compared to the pour over. Now I'm gonna have Hailie show you how to brew this on Aeropress.
Super exciting, love Aeropress. I mean, I also love the fact that Aeropress was invented by the same person who revolutionized, actually, should I say, flying discs, Aerobi Corp, right? So, Frisbees. You know what a Frisbee is? That's who invented Aeropress as well. All right, so a little piece of Bay Area history for you there. So since I'm using Aeropress with Prismo, which is our metal filter Aeropress attachment that has a leak-proof valve on it, I don't have to brew inverted anymore, so I'm gonna brew standard right side up. Even though it's no paper filter, you should still pre-warm. And gotta love Prismo for not leaking even a little bit, pretty great. It's not going to allow for any liquid to escape the chamber until I actually add pressure and plunge. All right. Pre-warm your vessel a second time for good measure. For this one, we're going to brew at 200 degrees, which is kind of hot on the Aeropress spectrum, right? I'm going to use 14.5 grams of coffee, and 210 grams of water. Just stumbling all over my words here because I'm at home, I can relax, I'm just brewing with my friends. All right, sweet. So we're gonna measure out 14.5 grams of coffee here. I'm actually gonna set it a tiny bit coarser than I would for filter. So I'm gonna go to one click above 4 on Ode. And that's Ode with V1 brews, so 1 click above 4 on Ode, and just kind of a little bit coarser than you would for filter, right? And here we go, and I'm going to measure out 14.5, no more, no less, grams of coffee. I mean, if you're 1 or 2 tenths of a gram off, no one's gonna lose sleep over that, right? My general rule of thumb again is 0.3 above or below, you're probably fine. Kettle is set to 200 degrees. Very good, very good. Got La Cabra right here up front. Sweet. So now for this, a little bit longer for Aeropress of a brew time at about 2 minutes, and I'm going to actually agitate at 40 seconds, and I'm gonna agitate for 10 seconds pretty vigorously. All right, so we are gonna put this in our pre-warmed Aeropress with Prismo on the bottom. And again, I can afford to go a little bit coarser with my Prismo. You might want to go slightly finer with paper filter, but probably somewhere along in the same realm of coarser than filter, but not too much coarser than filter. So we are at 200 degrees of water. I'm going to start the timer, and I'm going to go up to 210 grams with the water. So here we go. Can't you do it? All my years of being a barista have prepared me for this very moment, you guys. Yes, she did it. She did it, just chef's kiss. I mean, I'm not a chef, I'm a barista, but it is what it is. All right. And now I'm waiting until the 40-second mark again to break up that crust and agitate pretty vigorously, like more vigorously than I would agitate, say, a French press, which is going to be total immersion, because this is immersion, but it's, you know, at the end of the day, the grounds and the coffee are in separate chambers, right? All right, so 40 seconds, I'm going to really try to evenly but vigorously agitate for about 10 seconds. So I'm going to stop at 50. All right. And now we wait. You can, while you're waiting, you can twiddle your thumbs, which is highly not suggested. It gets pretty boring pretty fast. You can heat up another, you can fill up with more water, which is the efficient thing to do if you want some more coffee later. Or you can just think about how delicious this coffee is going to be. I really think that Aeropress is going to, like a slightly lower temperature, and coupled with the agitation and just Aeropress's nature, is going to make for even sweeter notes to come out of this coffee. And also, I think with Prismo, it's going to give that characteristic fluffier, more leaning towards espresso texture, which Prismo can create because it builds up pressure inside the chamber. So it really gets you closer to that espresso, like, decadent texture at home, which I, for one, am a fan of. Plus, it doesn't leak. All right, so we are at 2 minutes. You want to take your Aeropress off of your Akaya scale before plunging. That is the quickest way to, unfortunately, have your Akaya scale meet its end. And I'm applying steady and even pressure as much as I can all the way to the end there. And that's it. And Aeropress, gonna move to a smaller Monty Demitasse, because we love the Monty family of double-walled insulated ceramic mugs. Cheers to this. It's just such a different take on this same coffee. Brilliant. It is definitely fluffier. It definitely is more decadent. It brought out it brought out almost like a flaky pastry like vibe to it that I wasn't getting in the other, like, floral botanical, floral honey situation, and it brought like a beautiful, like, tartness right at the end out. I am into both of these. As soon as I stop recording, I'm gonna drink so much coffee. So cheers to that. Text us if you want some coffee.
So that was how you brewed this Cabra Ethiopia Gedeb on pour over, French press, and then Aeropress. I think this is a coffee that you should be very excited about. I know some of you guys are watching us talking about it already, and you're eagerly awaiting for it to arrive at your front door. I really enjoy Cabra. I really do think they're one of the best roasters out there, at least personally. I love them, and it's because they do that Nordic style of roast so well. This is one of these coffees that has worked quite well across multiple brewing methods. I think you should try them all, and you will definitely see how certain parts of the coffee taste a bit different. Certain notes you'll be able to pull out differently based on what type of brewing method you use. As much as I'm an espresso guy, I think the pour over does the best job with this coffee. You're getting a lot of floral notes in it, honey sweetness, and it's just very enjoyable in cup. If you want something that has a bit more body to it in the brew, maybe a rounded acidity, use the French press. And if you want something that's kind of in the middle of both, I would go with the Aeropress. But that's all I wanted to show off today. Thank you for spending the time to watch the video. We love making these drops videos, and we love showing off cool coffees. And this Cabra Ethiopia Gedeb wash is definitely one of them. And I think it's worth trying across all these brewing methods. You'll have a lot of fun with this coffee. Thank you for joining Hailie, and thank you for joining me. And as always, if you have any questions regarding fellow drops, fellow products, coffee, or anything, let us know and we'll get back to you. But thank you again for spending the time to watch today's video. We'll see you next week. This is a kind of a bonus clip. I'm gonna show you how to pull this coffee as an espresso. Now, this is one of these lighter roast coffees, and off the bat, I think you should pull long. You have to up your temperature and pull a bit longer. And we're gonna do a style of shot called a turbo shot. So we're going to actually kind of coarsen up our grind just a little bit, and this is going to allow you to extract the most out. And because you're using a higher temperature and because you're using a coarser grind or higher flow rate, you will be able to get a lot of clarity in this espresso. And I think it's just so much more forgiving, so much easier to get flavor notes in these lighter roast coffees if you pull along, use a coarse grind size, and use a high temperature. From a recipe standpoint, with depending on what machine you have, I would up the boiler temp. I'm doing 18 grams and 54 out, so 1 to 3. And as always, would recommend you WDT and properly distribute your coffee grounds and level before you give it a tamp. So I'm going in, I'm just breaking up all the clumps, and I'm gradually leveling the espresso puck. And with all of these lighter roast coffees, it's all right if it doesn't visually look very nice. Don't worry about the visuals. I know some of you guys are chasing the most beautifully extracted visual shot, but with these lighter roast coffees, things aren't going to be super pretty if you use a bottomless portafilter. And if you're following the recipe, which is we're gonna pull a 1 to 3 coarser, turbo, faster flowing shot, that might not look the best. Things may get messy, but taste the result in cup. Here we go. So that was 18 in, 54 out in 24, 25 seconds. Now, as you saw there, it didn't look super nice as it pulled towards the end, but because we're pulling long, we're going to get a lot more clear of an espresso. And actually with this specific shot that I just pulled, I actually could have gone a little bit coarser. And this might seem incredibly radical, but with lighter roast coffees, you do want to use that higher flow rate, slightly coarser grind size, high temperatures. It's another method of pulling light roast coffees, and I think this works out very well for this coffee. But as always, I would recommend you experiment, try a bunch of different stuff out, but I love this longer ratio. Maybe, you know, it doesn't look super pretty, but it's much clearer, and it works out really well for these light roast coffees, especially coffees from Cabra.